Hello and welcome to this pre-recorded event for GCSE Design and Technology, Textiles, Controlled Assessment Marking Training. To help you get the most out of this feedback, you may want to have the following documents printed out and handy, as we will refer to them during the session. Unit specification, assessment criteria, Principal Moderator's report to centres, the sample portfolio 5 TT01 01 2015 A and its commentary. We will be looking at a variety of assessed work and talking through how candidates did well and where candidates did less well. Please refer to the sample portfolio and commentary. We are going to read through each criterion, explaining how the candidate achieved well in each one and how they could have improved their marks where appropriate. To summarize, students tended to perform well in research, when they presented a detailed product analysis. Students tended to perform well in specification, when they wrote points in a form that could be judged on a measure of success. Students tended to perform well in ideas, when technical language was used to describe details, materials, and features, etc. Students tended to perform well in development, when they explored a variety of different ways to solve each problem, comparing each solution, and justifying their final choices with user consideration. Students tended to perform well in quality of manufacture and outcome when they completed a task with sufficient challenge to meet their level of ability. Students tended to perform well in test and evaluate when they gauged their level of success and honestly criticized their own work and choices. Now it's time to explore why students didn't do so well. Here is some evidence presented for the analysis criterion. Flick through slides 6 and 7 until you are familiar with their content. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. This work was awarded a low band mark of 1. The brief was set with some consideration to the end use. There was a surface level and random use of keywords and phrases within the mind map. There was no focus on how it had been of value and what the student had learnt from doing the activity. The responses on the second page lacked clarity about what needs to be done to progress the project into the research stage. The next 3 slides are evidence towards the research criterion. Flick through the slides until you are familiar with their content. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. This work was awarded a low band mark of 2 because some relevant images were presented with limited or simplistic labelling to explain their placement. A questionnaire was completed, but its value was limited as it formed a pick and mix of different design details. The work presented could be described as superficial and unfocused. There was insufficient material to aid the writing of a specification. This slide presented evidence for the specification criterion. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. The student presented a selection of sensible and valid statements that link back to the research. The points could be tested through observation, but not measured on their level of success. For example, the product was either going to have a sweetheart neckline or it wasn't. It was either going to be knee length or not. In situations like this, it is worth encouraging the student as part of their research to think why they might want a knee-length skirt. Is it for ease of movement, due to anything longer being a trip hazard, or for value and economy? These are probably better places to start a specification point from, and then the knee-length aspect becomes a possible design solution, which can be tested on a level of success in comparison to another product, maybe the item the student analysed as part of their research. The next 2 slides present evidence for initial ideas. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. The evidence presented was worthy of full low-band credit, 4 marks. The student presented a selection of simple ideas, which had come from simple links to the research or specification. The student presented some annotations that helped communicate some elements of the design, for example, the use of a zip. However, the student did not explain where the zip was to go, which didn't show an understanding of or purpose for the component. A significant number of the annotations were repetitive. This is a review page. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. This is low-band achievement because most sentences merely explain that a specification point was met or not, without explanation. Some points were expanded to explain how they were met. For example, the student wrote, "suitable for summer," as sleeveless and made of natural fabric, or "not machine washable because of the embellishments." A rating system was used, but it had no value. The point of review is to establish which initial idea is the best fit for the product specification and should be taken forward for development. Scores out of 10 give no justified indication of how or why specification points have been met. The next 3 slides are evidence towards the development criterion. Flick through the slides until you are familiar with their content. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. The student achieved a low mid-band credit of 4. This is because the first page offers a selection of different techniques, each for different parts of the product. The second page offers a selection of different pleats, which could be used on the final design. The third page explores different ways to fit the bodice with darts. Samples of these are presented on the page. Annotations alongside each detail suggest appropriate design progression and elements of improvements, suggesting borderline evidence between low and mid-band. The conclusions presented at the bottom of each page are a little evasive and make no reference to solving specific design problems. It is worth reading the low-band descriptor and the mid-band descriptor. The low band states, "Developments from alternative design ideas are minor and cosmetic. Simple modelling is used to test an aspect of the final design proposal against a design criterion." The mid-band descriptor states, "Developments are appropriate and use details from alternative design ideas to change, refine, and improve the final design proposal. Modelling using traditional materials and/or 3D computer modelling is used to test some aspects of the final design proposal against relevant design criteria." The evidence presented fulfills all the low-band descriptors, but the relevance of the testing, refining, and improving in the developed ideas are difficult to see. This is why the mark sat on the edge of this mid-band. The following 2 slides present evidence for quality of manufacture. Flick through the slides until you are familiar with their content. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. This work was deemed to be of low mid-band credit, about 11 marks. The operations included in the production of this item offered some challenge, including a zip could be considered challenging, but the execution of inserting the zip was poor. The diary annotation shows some understanding of working properties of materials and manufacturing processes. The attention to detail is weak. For example, the seams don't match well. There is puckering and folds, and some of the construction seems uneven and not symmetrical. Students and teachers need to work together to determine the best product for the student to make, choosing what will best show their skills, yet still be made well and to a high standard. Pursuing a complicated but poorly constructed product may have a more detrimental effect on the overall marks than a product that offers less challenge but is made with accuracy and to a high quality. For example, this final product was deemed poor quality, but it functioned adequately in quality of outcome and was awarded a borderline low mid-band mark. These two slides are evidence presented for testing and evaluating. Using the assessment criteria, consider what mark you might award this student for the work presented. You may wish to pause the audio recording to enable you to do this at your pace. This evidence is worthy of 1 mark. The candidate completed no testing on the final product. She wrote an evaluation of the project, which is not what this criterion asks for. Some of her evaluative comments did refer to specification points, but they were subjective. For example, comments about the length of the skirt or choice of decoration. She was given 1 mark for an appropriate level of QWC. To conclude, we highly recommend you encourage your teaching team and students to look at these feedback pages and mark the project work themselves, so they can see work where candidates did well and where they struggled to evidence sufficiently to achieve high marks. Read the Principal Moderator's report to centres. Read your E9 report from last year, referencing the candidate work identified within it. If you would like to find out more about grade boundaries and results statistics, then please follow the links on this slide. GCSE English subjects and Maths are changing first for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. GCEs for a range of subjects are changing first for first teaching in September 2015, with first assessments in summer 2017. We have just published our specifications on the Edexcel website. They have been published early in draft form to enable teachers to have early sight of our proposed approach. We are also running a series of launch events. Our draft specs and SAMs, as well as further information about our launch events, can be found on edexcel.com. We constantly look to improve the delivery of our training and appreciate all delegate feedback. Delegates will soon receive an email directing you to our online feedback form. The form takes no more than a couple of minutes to complete. Please take the time to let us know your thoughts by filling in this short form.